12 is better than 6 is a top-down Hotline Miami-esque action shooter. It's actually not a Hotline Miami clone in any way, although it would look like it considering how twitchy the gameplay is and how easily you can die. Now moving on to the good and the bad parts, if I had to talk about the good parts, it would be one, the aesthetic is quite pleasing and quite different. It's quite interesting to see all the art that has been made, and also one of the positives is the fact that you can sometimes actually perform some levels in a more stealthy way, and not to mention that you can also find different approaches for those levels. Obviously the biggest part of the game is the gunplay. Even though you can play some of those levels in a more stealthy way, the most interesting gameplay part is the way that those handles work. You're in the West, of course you're probably gonna need to cock your weapon before you shoot, especially if it's a revolver. So every time you have to shoot, you have to press the right mouse button in order to be able to either cock or draw the slider of your weapon in order to be able to shoot the next bullet. That means that you cannot spam bullets in order to shoot in the general direction that your opponent is facing. Now finishing up with the positive stuff, I also have to mention that the music is actually really good, and it has a few tracks that may get repetitive after some point, but they are certainly hyping and really good tracks of music. I do not know if the soundtrack is actually purchasable, but I would really like to have those in my library. Now on the negative aspects we go. The first negative aspect I want to mention is the fact that this game does not run on 60 FPS, and you might say, well, you're an asshole, and that doesn't really matter because it's not a game that's really supposed to run at 60 FPS. Well, actually, yeah, well, okay, if it ran at 30, but the fact is, even on my computer, that's probably a really strong computer, it ran at 30 FPS. I do not know if this is because it's a weird engine issue, but it ran at 38 FPS, which means that it has tearing and it also has jarring frame rate, and that really is an issue, especially when the gameplay is so twitchy, and it also makes the screen go a bit wobbly, which will probably make you really annoyed and pissed at it. And the other negative, which is probably the only negative I currently have, beyond the fact that some levels drag on a bit too long, and if you die you really have to replay a big section of the game in order to get to the end. And the other negative, as I mentioned, is the fact that it does not diversify your opponents from the environment, which means that especially in more rich environments you are not always able to understand if something is an enemy or if something is a stable prop. I've died many times because of that kind of nonsense, and I find it really irritating. And other than that, I probably should mention that it's about 4 to 6 hours long depending on how well you do, although those are really well done hours. This has been Peanut Gamers signing out.